Alright, how you guys doing? So this is Neil, and I'm bringing you another video, and this one's all about reincarnation. My philosophy views. A lot of people ask, hey, what's your personal philosophy? And this all came from when I did videos years ago on the delayed choice quantum eraser. So if you're curious what that is, click on my name below and then go on the little search icon there and type in that. Delayed choice quantum eraser. It'll probably come up if you just search YouTube for it too. I'll try to remember to put it in a link in the description of the delayed choice quantum eraser. Super important. And then that led to people wanting to know more about, like, well, what's my views on why that experiment carries out the way it does? What's the reasoning for it? And that led to a three-part video series on digital physics. And then people say, well, we want to know about your personal view of the theory of everything. And that came out with my video, The Theory of Everything. Well, part of my theory of everything is encompassing of my philosophy. And so in my philosophy, what exactly is reincarnation? And this is what the topic's all about. So one, does my theory of everything contradict reincarnation? Or does naturalism contradict reincarnation? The answer is no, it does not. Now, it could, depending on the type of reincarnation you believe in. If you believe in, supernaturalism, obviously that would contradict naturalism. So how exactly does reincarnation work in a natural framework? Well, remember in my new theory of everything, which is literally a theory of everything in the universe, what everything in the universe is made of, everything is information being processed. So if everything is information being processed, and I talked about this briefly, how that could mean that ghosts could exist. But what would ghosts be? Ghosts would be another form of information being processed. A way to see that as an analogy would be kind of like if we were a part of a simulated world, like a video game. And so the ghost is programmed to work a little differently than the human body is designed to work. That's not quite how I see it, but it's just like an analogy. So the ghost, though, is not who you are either. So when you die and you become a ghost, it's still not who you really are. And this is where it gets kind of weird. Like, what is a true self? What is conscious? And when I call true self, I call it Nam. And it comes from a Sanskrit phrase. The whole phrase together means true or trueness or truth. And so I took that word Nam, I thought it sounded cool. And the word Nam then here refers to the true self. So whenever I say Nam from now on, like Nam, 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 whenever I say that word from now on, I'm referring to your true self. That is who you really are. I probably should look at the camera when I'm talking, huh? Instead of like at myself. It's kind of, and what I'm seeing, I'm recording in the front. I can see myself on the camera. Anyway, so, right, so let's get down to it. Some of the things I'll be covering in this here is, of course, how it's not a contradiction. I'll go in more detail about that. I'm gonna start. I have some notes here. I don't forget what to go. I don't lose track. How it all starts. How does reincarnation start? What drives reincarnation? What does not drive it, like karma, which doesn't drive it, like what you do, and why that doesn't affect it. How some contradictions come up, like, hey, if there's only so many true selves or souls that are here and Earth's population is growing, then what do all those other souls or true selves do while they're waiting for a new body to be born into? Because there's obviously not, there's more bodies than there are souls. So it means we have a bunch of soulless bodies walking around, like these types of contradictions. And it's really easy to explain within my model and how those are not contradictions at all. How we never go backwards, we never come back as a donkey or a dog or something of lesser intelligence than what we are now, and why that is. Because that all has to do with the evolution of self. Again, this is a model of reincarnation I pretty much guarantee you never heard before, unless someone else out there has remembered it. So how did I first come up with the idea of my entire worldview, of my new physics philosophy of the universe, of everything, of what everything is, how everything works, how everything operates, what we are, what we're composed of, how reincarnation works, what ghosts are. I go that in another video. How did I come up with all all these ideas, all this very new, different ideas about things, like especially my idea of reincarnation. See, this is how different it is from anything else you've ever heard out there before. And just the fact I say it's naturalistic in itself is like, what are you talking about that? But you truly do exist after death. That is, your consciousness is alive. And so this view, though, of reincarnation, how it works, the whole model of it is so different than any model you've ever seen before. And how I came up with it is that I've been meditating since I was 11 years old. I'm now 39. And so I've been meditating for a long time. And one day I was meditating, and when I was 11, and that's when I first remembered seeing this like thing open up, this like portal So while I was meditating, I saw this portal. Hopefully this doesn't look weird. I'm looking directly at you guys. Anyway, hopefully the lighting here is okay too. I had a hard time trying to get the lighting right. It kind of looks like it's just too, I don't know, too much light. But anyway, so I was meditating. When I was meditating, I would see this portal open up. And my eyes are closed, obviously, when I'm meditating. And I see this portal open up in front of my face. And it starts swirling around. It feels like it's starting to pull me in. Now, right before that happens, what would happen is I would start to feel like literally like my brain, like remember you think like right here in front of your head, right? And so that's where we typically like have our pictures and our thoughts. It feels like it's extending outside your head. Now maybe this might not be true for you, but for me this is true. It extends outside my head right here. This is where I see everything. When I daydream, it's all right here. Like it literally feels like it's outside my body, out here somewhere. And that's where I'm seeing everything on the screen. So that part of my brain and part of my consciousness felt like it would expand out bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And what would happen is that would kind of freak me out because I feel like my consciousness, that screen would feel like it would fill up the entire room like a 3D screen. And it would fill up my entire room. I feel like my head literally grew huge. And I'm like, that's so weird. That feeling was so strange. Anyway, so while I'm having that sensation, and by the way, this is Harley Quinn behind me. I did a cool watercolor of her. Anyway, I'm going to do another one, but this isn't mine. Anyway, so as I was having that experience, sometimes this portal would show up and it started feeling like it would suck me in. Now, for years and years and years, I was afraid of the portal. I would not go into it. Like every time I started feeling like I was getting sucked into the portal, immediately I would snap myself back to reality, so to speak. I'm going to go ahead and move the camera here. It's just kind of hard, the angle that it's at. And so I would basically snap myself back to, there you go, sorry about that. Anyway, I would just kind of snap myself back to reality, so out of that meditative stance or state of consciousness. And the reason I would do that is because I was so scared. I didn't know what would happen on the other side of that portal. I mean, I don't know if I was going to die or whatever. And at the time, I feared death. Now let's fast forward years into the future. I'm 20-something years old, a little bit past 25, I think. And I'm meditating, and I see that portal. Now, I'm listening to this like very calming type. It wasn't a meditative thing. It was more like a calming relaxation voice, and just go with everything, be calm, be at peace, be happy. And she was repeating a lot like this kind of mantra almost. And as I'm listening to that, I just had no fear. And I went right through the portal. Choom. My head got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden the portal shows up, and then I just went right through the portal. And when I got inside the portal, I remembered everything about who I am, everything I have been, all my past lives. So while I was there, I had total recollection. I mean, I need to get a haircut. It's like hairs are everywhere. So I had the hat on because my hair is literally just crazy right now. Anyway, so while I was there in that state of consciousness, my consciousness felt like it was as big as the universe. Now, I'm not a person that believes that consciousness is synonymous with the universe, just so you know. All you have to do is watch my new theory of everything, you'll see that I'm not one of those believers. I don't believe that consciousness is all there is. I actually believe that information being processed is all there is, and we are kind of like artificial intelligences coming from that. But we're real. We're not artificial in that sense. We are real intelligences, but in the analogy I give throughout it of the video game, we're kind of like the game characters. Anyway, so basically it's like we're in the matrix, but there is no way out because there's no outside the matrix. So this is all there is. And so it's real to us, and that's all that matters. And we are real, and that's all that matters, we think. Anyway, so we're real thinking things, but that's not what reality is. Reality isn't thought or consciousness. We don't create reality with our thought or consciousness. Anyway, so that being said, so I was there, and my consciousness felt like it was so huge, and probably because, you know, it has to be because we're all very, very old. If you start, I mean, you'll understand this and when you understand my model of reincarnation, of how old, the minimum age you have to be if you started on planet Earth. And that's right around, you know, like 2-3 million years, something like that. Okay, so there I was remembering everything, all my past lives, all the knowledge I've gained throughout my many lives. You know, I could have cured AIDS if I could have brought all that back. So as I'm being sucked back into my consciousness, as I had this experience, as I'm being sucked back in, and at the time I didn't believe in reincarnation. I kind of had a somewhat of a view, kind of like, well, maybe, It was more of a maybe thing. Like maybe we come back as people and that's it. I didn't think that we start out as like animals or something like that. I thought that was ridiculous. I thought the whole notion of reincarnation was kind of like iffy. My views of the world were so different. Now, when I came back with that theory of everything, that new theory of everything, how I explained. If you guys haven't watched that video, definitely watch it. If you're interested at all about what reality is, how it works. If you're interested in a theory of everything, an actual theory that unifies all the laws, and I'm gonna go more into that of how it unifies laws and like some evidences for that new theory of everything. But anyway, how come relativity contradicts quantum mechanics? You know, how do those two come together? And this shows how those come together and all that. Anyway, so I came back. I had all these memories and stuff of my past lives, but I couldn't hold on to all of it. It was kind of like when you have a dream, and the dream is so vivid, and then when you wake up, you're like, oh, I know it so well. And then all of a sudden it just starts going away. You're like, wait, you're trying to grab onto your dream. Wait, don't. And then you only remember bits and pieces of the dream. You're like, oh man, that was such an awesome dream. I only remember bits and pieces of it. Like literally as you're waking up, it just gets sucked away from you. That's kind of what it felt like. As I was coming back to this consciousness, this human consciousness in this body, all the information was just flying away from me. So much information. Like, wait, I want that. Oh, I couldn't. And there's so much my human consciousness couldn't understand. Just the information came and my human brain just flat couldn't understand it. You know, so I couldn't hold on to it because the brain can't hold on to it, so I can't hold on to it. And but what I could hold on to, I kept onto everything I could hold on to. And that was how the universe worked, what we're made out of, reincarnation, what ghosts are, some of my past lives, not all of them obviously, and even those only like fragments of it. Just like now, if I ask you, what were you doing, let's say a year ago at this exact time, you probably wouldn't know. And you only have bits and fragments of memory of your life. You don't remember your entire life in its totality. You can't remember everything, right? But when you're in your true self, you remember absolutely everything, every life you lived, everything you ever said, in between lives, everything, you remember it all. So another thing I'm going to go into is what I call non-verse and also ghost world and what the difference is. So you have this world that we live in, you have ghost world we live in as a ghost, and when the ghost dies, if you're advanced enough and you found the second path, you go to what I call non-verse. Anyway, so just want to give some background, a little bit about me and kind of how I came up with it. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth and what's happened. And a lot happened when I came back. I was a whole, like, not a different person, but my belief system was completely different. It changed in a moment because I couldn't deny it. And from that moment on, I have what I call dual awareness or dual consciousness. I'm fully aware of my human consciousness and how the brain works and what it thinks, and the voice of human consciousness in my head that everyone has, that voice you hear when you're just thinking and stuff. You hear that voice talking in your head. Maybe not everyone has that. I just assume it because I do. But it's just a normal. I've talked to other people that obviously have it, so I know I'm not the only one on the planet. But maybe someone out here listening to this doesn't have that little voice in their head, and it's that voice that you've always identified with yourself, your own self, your thoughts, your thinking. And anyway, so I have that, and then I have my true self-consciousness, but it's limited because I'm interfacing with this human body. And while I'm doing that, my true consciousness is limited, but I'm still aware of it and how it thinks, and it thinks differently than I think, because that's actually me. This isn't me. But sometimes we get confused and we think, but I look in the mirror and I see this is me, but it's really not me. The me is what remembers every life. And this conscious, anyway, we'll get into that consciousness and what exactly it means. So basically this consciousness will go away and become bye-bye. But my true self will remember all this. And so it really doesn't go away. It just becomes human consciousness. This self basically unifies back with me, the true self. You know, like merges back together again. And then I remember all this as another life that I've lived. We'll go through karma a little bit. What exactly it is, that can be a whole thing on its own, but I can break it down briefly, what it's not in my worldview. Ghost, what the Nam is. Again, I told you Nam is a true self. And then is there a way to escape reincarnation? And if so, what do you do after that? What's the purpose of reality? What's the purpose of being alive? And this kind of shows kind of like your purpose of being here, your purpose of being alive, sort of in a way. So let's go down with it. How does reincarnation start? So reincarnation starts in the same way, in a very similar way, as a line of evolution. So if you ever saw an evolutionary tree of, let's say, something starting from a small little mammal, like a rat-like creature, then evolving to like a lemur, and then that evolving to like a kind of monkey, and then to like an ape, and then into a human, right? So you see this kind of evolutionary tree. That's similar to how reincarnation works in my model, but for the individual, for the true self. So all true selves have a beginning. We're not eternal. We have a beginning. We have an age, and you'll remember the age when you're back into your true self. You'll be like, oh yeah, this is how old I am. This is how long I've been around for. And you might put that, if you want to put that into human language or whatever numbers, then you can say what that age is. And so if you originate on Earth, now here's where it, just to answer that contradiction, well, how is it that there are so many people on Earth now than there were in the past? There's too many people. Are a bunch of them like zombies? Where are their souls? Where are their true selves at? Or if there was enough true selves, then if you go into the past, there wasn't enough bodies, so were they all just waiting around to be in a body? Now, in itself, that's not really a contradiction. It's not really inconsistency. It just means that, well, yeah, they were just waiting around, or yeah, now we have a bunch of zombie bodies going around that don't have consciousness in them. So one can easily just say that, and that would be an answer, and it wouldn't be inconsistent with itself. But that's not how it works in my model. So in my model, there are many planets out there that have life on them, that evolve life, intelligent life, and less intelligent life, all in different stages. Some more advanced than we are, some less advanced than we are, and so forth. And so they all have this evolutionary branch on them. And all consciousnesses, all noms, have a starting point when they originated. They might originate on Earth. They might have originated on another planet. So there's all these planets with life on it. And so there's always somewhere for it. When someone dies, there's always somewhere for their nom to go. But also it stays a certain amount of time as a ghost. Then the ghost dies, and then it stays a certain amount of time as its true self nom. If you've found the second path. And if you found that second path, then you realize that ghost isn't who you really are. That is, some people think they're the ghost or the soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. I'll explain how that's all natural. It's all part of the same stuff. Like I said, it's all information being processed. It's just being processed a little different. So the form of the ghost is a little different because the rule sets are a little different for it. What it's made out of, kind of like how it's composed of. And again, it's all the information the same. So, but the way the information is structured is different than the body. So that's why I can't walk through a wall, but the ghost can walk right through a wall. And Nam is also constructed differently to where it can have, maybe not infinite memory, because you're always going to have a finite age, but can remember everything that you've ever done. Everything. I mean, absolutely everything. Every little thing you've seen, every little thing you heard, it can go back and recollect what that was and exactly what date it was, exactly what time it was, all that. Okay, so with that being said, a new Nam is generated all the time. There's always new noms being generated. And then there's also noms that die, and I'll go into that. This is where people really want to believe that the true self, the true identity is immortal, cannot die. It's very scary to accept and believe that. Now, I believe it is possible for it to die, and I'll go to two ways that I know of that the true self can die. But it's very, very difficult, and one of them is actually a choice, and the other one is something that goes into my philosophy of more of my worldview philosophy and how things work and what's going to happen. But anyway, so that's how all life generates. It generates at the time. So when that very life is forming from the very cellular structure, from when the sperm and cell interact, from this mammal, it could be on another planet, but if it was on Earth, it was some sort of rat-looking like creature. And it has to be a creature that is intelligent enough to gain knowledge about its surroundings and about stuff, both emotionally and logically. So to be able to obtain this knowledge and then apply it to a new situation. That's what I mean by a truly intelligent being. So a crow, although it might be able to express some level of figuring out puzzles and things like that, is not something that necessarily could learn over time, but maybe it does. And if a crow is something intelligent enough to learn over time, then it'll eventually develop emotions anyway. So basically, everything reincarnates. Bugs, everything, trees. But if it doesn't have a level of intelligence, when the Nam first begins and develops, right? So if it first begins as a tree, it will never have the intelligence level to ever evolve. So it will always come back as something of equal intelligence, as some sort of plant life. Bugs, the same thing. Lizards, the same thing. Sorry for you lizard lovers out there. But they still come back. They come back. The thing is, no matter how many times a lizard comes back and how much memory that Nam has as a lizard life, because it doesn't have the intelligence level to grow, it just stays of some high-level lizard intelligence. So it might, through many, many lives living like a lizard-like creature, have this like highly, knowledgeableness of being a lizard or being a lizard-like creature, because it doesn't always come back as a lizard. It might come back as other things of equal intelligence. It'll never come back as something higher than it, because it can't, because its true self never expands its knowledge base. So it never evolves. The true self of the Nam of the lizard never evolves, never expands. But of the first creatures that had intelligence enough to evolve and expand, then those creatures eventually outgrow that form and they literally evolve. They change. The true self changes and evolves into something more intelligent. It can only now reincarnate as something more intelligent. So it might reincarnate as this rat-like creature on Earth for many, many times, maybe 1,000 times. So the basic process is when that true self is formed, it forms as a true self at the very cellular structure of that creature. When that cell, even before that cell divides, the second you have like the sperm and cell come together, you have some form of single-celled organism existing before it divides and divides and divides and divides as inside the womb or inside the living creature. At that particular point, the true self is intermingled completely with that single-cell organism in all of its DNA. And in the billions upon billions of DNA strands, it's intermingled with all of that. And when it divides, the self kind of divides with it as it's interfacing with it, right? And so the true self is very malleable. It's not a form. I mean, it takes on a form so that other selves can see it, interact with it. It has a projection that you kind of see. But its true state of existence is very malleable. It can just flow and just evolve and mold and intertwine like on the cellular level, like I said. And this takes a very malleable type of creature, almost like a ghost-like malleableness, not like clay, but like almost like it can intertwine with itself, almost like smoke or something. So that's the nature of its structure. And so as it is intermingled and the cells pull apart, and there's now 2 cells, it's intermingling with those 2 cells now being divided, and then to 4, and then to 8, then to 16, and so on and so forth, until eventually you have this lump of living stuff that begins to have a heartbeat and starts to have brain waves and stuff like that. And when that happens, that entire division process of the cells is what makes true self begin to forget what it really is, all of its memories. So let's say this is your 1,000th life living as this rat-like creature. And again, you're not limited to that one planet. You might have lived, 500 lives maybe on that planet as that very first organism that you started as. But then you might have jumped to other planets and then come back, and jumped to other planets and come back, and so forth. But they're all of equal, like, intelligent creatures. They might look very different, but they have somewhat equal intelligence. And through those different forms, you've gained different knowledge. By having a form of like a rat-like creature, you have a certain type of knowledge that you gain with that form. But you're on another planet with something that looks more like a squid or something. But it's not. Squids are way more intelligent than rats, but here on Earth. But let's say this creature looks kind of like a squid, has that kind of form, but has rat-like intelligence, something like that. And now you're gaining a whole new type of knowledge by just being in that new form. Anyway, so as you go through these processes, think about how all that dividing happens, right? And as all that dividing happens, you're intermingling with all that DNA, with every cell that divides, and then you have this lump of thing. You begin to identify with that thing that you're interfacing with, that you're intertwined with. And that creates what I call a split personality. Now that's a phrase everyone knows about, but because it fits it. So you now have developed this split personality where you identified with that which you divided and interfaced with for so long in the womb. And then as it comes out, it starts to eventually to think for itself and has that kind of a thought process, whatever that thought process might be for that creature. You are now identifying as that is the self. And as a rat-like creature, you'll always think that, like, until you become something of like human-like intelligence, then you're always going to be stuck in that frame of consciousness where you're totally identifying with the form you're interfacing with on a planet. So you think that's who you really are. And then it dies. And so that, anyway, that's how it starts, right? I'll go into more detail in between, but so that's how it all starts. That's how we all started. And then you evolve, and then you might go into something, let's say like a lemur type of intelligence. And you'll go maybe to different planets, and sometimes you might be stuck on one planet for a long time, coming back as that same type of creature, or other creatures on that same planet that have similar intelligences. And you continue to get more and more intelligent. Now, once you reach that threshold of intelligence, so for example, between a chimpanzee or a bonobo and a human, the intelligence level there's a huge gap there, right? So you might not be able to come back as a, let's say you lived as a chimpanzee and different types of apes for many different lives, like thousands and thousands of lives on Earth, let's say. And then you've reached that pinnacle where you're evolved, you can no longer come back as a chimpanzee or any of those apes because you're too intelligent. And because you're too intelligent for that form, that is, if you were to come back and intermingle with that form, you would right away know, I know who I am, and you'd pop right out of it. So you basically you would know that something was wrong. The consciousness would not identify with that figure, with that form, with that level of brain intelligence, and would just know that it's being limited too much. It would make it like yourself wake up, or just want you to be like a malfunctioning there. And the whole entire processing of the universe understands this. It doesn't understand the way we understand things, but it has a logical framework and will not allow that to happen. So the next step up would be a human being on Earth, but you might not be able to make that leap, because even unless it's like of a very low intelligence human being, now that might be in some sort of mentally disabled form of consciousness, a mentally disabled form of human being, because they are more intelligent than an ape, but just barely. So you might come back as a mentally challenged person. And then after living enough lives like that, and you gain enough intelligence, and you come back as a normal, low-level intelligence human, then eventually as a very, very intelligent human. This is if it all happened on Earth. Of course, this happens, you might bounce around to different planets. You might go to another planet with an in-between life form. That's something that is not quite as intelligent as a human, but is more intelligent than any ape that we have. And you go and you reincarnate on that planet as that particular creature. And then you go on different planets and bounce around. So you're not always limited to one planet, but your origin started at a planet. And if you originated here on planet Earth, then you're an Earthling. And that would be about 2 to 3 million years ago when this first, life forms began to evolve that were of high enough intelligence to actually evolve, for their true self to evolve, and that is to go through this evolutionary process of reincarnation. Whereas everything else is staying, it's going throughout different, like bugs, they're reincarnating different planets and stuff like that too, but they're never progressing, they're never evolving, they're just kind of, just staying in that one realm of consciousness, of state of intelligence, because they can't evolve. Okay, so you can kind of see now how this might actually drive evolution sometimes. If there isn't a form out there on a planet, and there's all these consciousnesses, in between as ghosts, and they need to be reincarnated, that can kind of force that planet or a planet to have reincarnation happen, to where there's a form there. As it tries to come back in, it needs a form, and it can't on that planet, and so one of those planets eventually gives, and reincarnation happens, to where the new form begins to emerge for it to happen. And the universe, the processing, of the universe, just go into my theory of everything to understand how this works, but basically because you have this big, like, kind of B theory of time, everything's already all there for it. The consciousnesses aren't. They're A theory of time. But it doesn't know, but there's a logical process how everything works. And so you can only come back as those beings. So it knows that, it doesn't know, but again, that's just an analogy. But the processing has a place for you on that B theory of time, regardless of what level of consciousness you ever achieve at any given time. And so it's not like you're literally driving evolution, because all the evolution has already happened, but it places you on a timeline where you need to be of your level of intelligence. Okay, so with that being said, that's how it all starts. And then you can see how your own self evolves. So if you look at all your past lives, you can see your own evolutionary tree all the way back to the very beginning of the rat-like creature. I say rat-like creature meaning intelligence-wise, not how you necessarily looked. But if it was on Earth, it was probably something that looked similar to a rat. Right, so you can see the entire evolutionary tree, and you can see all the different planets, different creatures that you evolved at. You can see your entire existence up until now. Right, so that's the idea that is very different than a lot of other ones. So you can see now why you cannot go backwards. So just look at my notes so I don't make sure I don't forget nothing. So you can see now, I'm on track. So you can see now how you can't go backwards. right? Because once you reach a certain state of intelligence, you literally can't fit into that form anymore. So you can never come back as a dog. I'm sorry, dog lovers, but you'll never come back as a dog. In my understanding of reincarnation, what I remember from my own personal experience, you never come back. You never go backwards. You can't go backwards. And so also you can see with it's intelligence that drives your reincarnation and not your actions, not what you do. Obviously, what you do in a life can help you get more intelligent and help you evolve, but it doesn't affect your evolutionary state. Neither does suffering. Now, suffering is a real thing. Suffering actually exists in the universe. It's something you can kind of measure almost. You can look at someone and kind of see how much suffering they're in, by how their face changes and their body language and stuff like that. So you can see that person's in a great state of suffering, or they're a really good actor, right? But when it comes to what is good and what is bad, you can't see that. I know people say, what about killing? And everyone agrees killing is bad. Well, except for sociopaths, they might not care. So, but everyone with a working, functioning brain doesn't like murder and thinks it should be outlawed and stuff like that. But that doesn't have a form to it in the universe. It's a conscious. It's basically a judgment that we pass upon someone based on their actions. The universe doesn't do this. The universe doesn't care. So, because remember, the universe is just a processing of information. So, the reality is just a processing information. Again, check out my video on the new theory of everything. Because of that, because it cannot care, it does not care, it cannot drive your reincarnation. So even though suffering comes back to us, and this is where it's a little bit weird, but so my view of karma, let's take a quick side step here, because karma does play a role in reincarnation, sort of. Karma is not what Hindus believe it is, or all these other religions believe it is. Karma is actually the universe balancing out the suffering and everything. Because the universe doesn't see good and bad, it doesn't balance those things out. But it does balance out suffering. However, it doesn't balance out anti-suffering or counter-suffering, because there is no counter-suffering. You can say, well, maybe it's doing good, but it doesn't see good, right? So maybe you say, well, maybe if I help someone that's suffering, it's not how the universe works. And I wish it worked that way. That'd be awesome. This is just how I understand it working. This is what I remember about it working. And everyone that's in between lives as a Nam that has found the second path, I'll describe what that is in a minute, understands this is how the universe works. There's no disagreement. Everyone sees it. It's a matter of fact. It's just a matter of looking at all the data, all information, going, wow, suffering comes back to every individual, and there's never a way to escape that. And it doesn't matter what actions you do, you'll never stop that from happening. This means that if you're a doctor or you're a dentist, you need to fix the person's tooth. They're in extreme pain. So you give them a shot into their mouth, and that shot causes them suffering. And then it's numb and they're fine. And it causes them a lot of anxiety. Say they're afraid of needles. They're like, oh, I don't want to be here. And you have to give them the shot, So you cause all the suffering to them. It was your action that caused that suffering. That suffering that you caused them will come back to you, regardless that you did it to help them. You did it and you got rid of their tooth pain, right? Or you give them a root canal, whatever it was. And now they have no more tooth pain. They're like, oh, thank you so much. Like, the little bit of anxiety you gave them and a little bit of pain from the needle was nothing. They're so happy. They're so grateful that you got rid of that ultimate tooth pain, which was horrible. It doesn't matter. The universe doesn't see any of that. The universe is a processing thing. So it doesn't care why you did it, right? So you did it because you're helping this person, to help them get out of suffering, to help alleviate their suffering. It doesn't matter. You cause them suffering, that suffering comes back to you. I know it sucks, right? But that's just the way it is. And that kind of like lends some validity to my views, because it's so easy for people to go, I don't like that. I'm not going to believe in that. It's so convenient for people to believe in things that they like, things that make sense to their own way the way they want things to be. I would love it to be different. It'd be awesome if we can, do things to help alleviate suffering, and then that makes it to where we don't suffer as much. But that's not the way it works. Sorry. So instead, the suffering you cause always comes back to you. Always. Even if it's by accident. You accidentally step on a dog's foot, and they're like, arr! That's very little bit of suffering, but that still comes back to you. And sometimes, and this is what really sucks, is sometimes you can escape suffering because you reincarnate on planets where their technology is so advanced that you have like these nanobody immune systems where you never get sick. it basically eliminates most of the ways of suffering. You know, they dull, the nanobots can actually dull the pain almost completely, to where, you know, you want to be able to feel pain somewhat, because you need to know, like, is my flesh being ripped apart or whatever. They can just repair it anyway, so it doesn't matter, I guess. But you always want some level of feeling of pain, but they can dull it to the point to where it's like, so that's nothing, you know. And they can even get rid of emotional suffering. So if someone breaks up with you, and they can just dull it to where you hardly feel anything. If you reincarnate on planets like that for a long period of time, but you've had acquired a bunch of suffering before, and then you reincarnate on another planet, and you cure more suffering. So you jump to this planet that has hardly any suffering on it. It's hard to suffer on that planet. Then you reincarnate on this planet where there's a lot of suffering. So you caused a lot of suffering, whether it was on purpose or accident. Then you reincarnate on another planet where there's not that much suffering. It's hard to suffer. Then you reincarnate on a planet where there's a lot of suffering. So in between these planets, you're causing all these suffering, but then you're never able to suffer very much. So you're acquiring a lot of karma, meaning you're acquiring a lot of suffering that needs to come back to you. And then you finally come on a planet, and it all comes rubber banding back to you, boom, all at one life. And that's why sometimes you suffer so much in one life. Not because you're a super bad person, not because you caused a lot of suffering in your past life. You might have caused a lot of suffering in cumulative or cumulative effect of lives, but you managed to escape that suffering, and eventually the universe, it has to catch back up because it has to balance out. Kind of like if a roulette wheel, right? Gambling. So if you're spinning a roulette wheel, or you're rolling dice, let's say you have one die, and it's 1 through 6, and you're rolling and rolling and rolling it, right? On average, every 6 times just to land on 6, every 6 times on average just land on 1. That's the average. If it escapes that enough, landing on number 6 enough times in a row, right? 25 times later, it has to balance out to where it averages out about every 6. Well, actually, it has to average out to where every 6 rolls is a 6. But you might have to roll it a lot. You might have to roll it, you know, 600 or 6,000 times even. Sometimes you roll exactly 6 times, and the 6th roll is a 6. Sometimes the 12th roll is a 6. You know, it's going to be different every time. But what will happen is, if it skips for enough times, there's this threshold, it can only skip, and this is just the rule of statistics. If it skips enough times, then it's going to catch up. And some people will disagree with me because they'll tell me, well, every roll is a new roll. Trust me on this. I've been gambling a long time, and I understand how it all works from a personal basis, but also from mathematical basis and all of that. If you look into it, you'll see that, yeah, every coin flip is unique and doesn't affect the previous coin flip. However, you can also look up, what are the odds? What are the statistical odds of flipping heads 19 times in a row? Well, about 20 times in a row. So now you can see the past flips actually affect the present flip. But why? How is that so? That's impossible. If every flip is unique, then how can past flips? But it's not. It's taking a statistic of flipping the coin so many times in a row. And the odds of flipping it heads 5 times in a row is greater than flipping heads 1 time in a row. And same thing is true with flipping tails 5 times in a row, or flipping heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, right? 6 times in a row, but you know, like this, back and forth. So why does the universe work that way? Again, my theory of everything would actually, if you look at my theory of everything, it actually explains all that. Because it's all a mathematical type simulation almost. Because we're information being processed in some logical way, then if you do flip that coin, the information knows that coin's been flipped so many times. It doesn't know it like we know things, but it's all there as information. So anytime you flip a coin, it has to balance out. There's a 50-50 chance of landing heads or tails, so it has to balance out. So logically, if you happen to skip heads 19 times in a row, those heads have to make up for themselves, and they will. Trust me, you can test this yourself with flipping of a coin. Just flip it, flip it, flip it, flip it, and record heads, tails. And every time you have an equal amount of heads, equal amount of tails, start over, and then start over. And sometimes it takes 100 flips to start over. Sometimes it only takes 2 flips. Sometimes but eventually, always it balances out. My point is that is the way it is with suffering. Eventually, it will balance out. So if you skip heads enough times, what happens? It has to land on heads a bunch of times in a row. Not necessarily in a row, but within a short period of flips, it'll land on heads a lot more than tails. So it'll neutralize itself out. If you've ever been to like Vegas and played like the roulette wheel and watched it gives you the stats on these newer wheels, and they have a digital display, and it tells you the stats of how many times it's landed on black and red and the percentages of it. You'll see those percentages will go up and down, but they always balance out at some point. So it's like this one's at like, 49%, this one's at, whatever the opposite of that would be. And then eventually they hit 50-50, and then they go up and down, back and forth. And it kind of helps players think they can get away of, oh, if it's very even, I'll just start betting on black. And if you keep doing that, if red is very even to black, then yeah, eventually it's going to balance itself out. But you might have lost more money than you'd win by the time it does balance out. Anyway, but keep doing it, and hopefully it'll all balance the other way, and then maybe you'll become even again. Don't avoid the bet, but anyway, so that's a little sidetrack. So that's how suffering works. So all suffering will come back to you. And my whole point, well, all that sidetracking was of statistics and all that, was at some point, if you escape suffering long enough, you're on a planet, it all just comes rubber banding back to you. So you have a lot of suffering, like making up for itself, and then you go to another planet, and So if you're ever wondering, it's not, if a lot of suffering is happening in your life right now, my point is that it might not be because of something you did in your past life or even your last couple lives. It could have been, a bunch of lives that you just happen to escape suffering a lot. And then, you had a big lucky turn. Now you have a big unlucky turn of events. Kind of like you land on heads a bunch of times, and now it has to land on tails a bunch of times. It has to make up for itself. And so anyway, that doesn't drive a reincarnation, but it can sometimes affect where you're at in reincarnation. I'm going to go into just briefly because reincarnation kind of delves into like what ghosts are, and therefore what so-called demons are. There's nothing about what angels are, but in my view, because they don't exist. Unless you want to think of a really, really good ghost as an angel, or anyway, that's for you to decide. But I'll describe what a demon is in my view within reincarnation. So before we get into that, though, actually that's where we're at now. We're at ghosts and Nam, and then we'll go into how do you escape reincarnation, and is it possible, and what happens if you do, and what do you do from that point on to the rest of your existence, and how do you not get bored and go crazy, right? So, first off, what are ghosts? So ghost is an in-between. It's a go-between. That's my best phrase for it, a go-between. It's an intermediate form that it's what allows the true self, the Nam, to interface with a physical form. So everything has a ghost for the Nam to interface with it. Most ghosts dissipate right away and reincarnate, boom, like bugs. Their ghost dissipates, it dies, they reincarnate almost instantly. Whereas something more advanced, like a human being, their ghost can stay around for a long time before it finally dissipates, falls apart, dies, if you want to call it death, and then you reincarnate. And this is where we're getting to the second path here in a second. So, for those that never find the second path, here's their existence. And so, but really quickly again about the ghost. So, the ghost is a form that my phone tends to only want to record for so long and just stop. So, the ghost is a form that allows the Nam to interface with the physical form, if you want to call it that. It's all information being processed, but what we call a physical form, because it is different in its form than a ghost or the Nam, right? Its substance is different to us, and therefore its information is being processed differently to make a body than it is to make a ghost form or to make the Nam form. The ghost form isn't like the Nam form. It can't remember everything, recall everything. It doesn't have the malleability to just like form and divide itself up into cells and forget who it is. The ghost is literally just something that the Nam interfaces with as a go-between to connect with the form that it's going to intertwine with. And the ghost is almost like so the Nam interfaces with the ghost and kind of stays with the ghost, and then a lot of itself gets intertwined with the body. And so there's a piece of Nam, let's say Nam here, then you have the ghost, and then you have the other form here. So a piece of the Nam always stays here, remembering everything, all of its lives. But it's being pushed to the ghost, and it's existing inside the ghost as its own form, and it takes on this form of thinking that's who it is. And then as it's intertwining with the ghost form, it also intertwines with the physical form, but the ghost form is what attaches to that physical form. And then when that attaches to the physical form, that is during that processing of cellular division, the ghost is already attaching. But the ghost is staying it's attached, but it's not intermingling. The Nam is intermingling with the ghost and intermingling with the physical form at the same time. And this develops a personality a split personality of self that is consciousness. So now if you think about when you form as a human being, you can see how prevalent this is. When you form as a human being and in that cellular division, you start dividing inside the womb. You're forgetting. You're starting to identify more and more with this form that's developing. Then it gets a heartbeat, then it gets a brain, and then it comes out of the womb. And then maybe you still kind of have some memories of self, and that is why you might actually see, sometimes when kids see invisible friends, they're actually seeing invisible friends. And so that is those beings in between lives. And maybe even ghosts, whatever. I'll go into what again a nam is in a second, in nam verse, but and that is the second path. But so as you begin to grow and gain memories as this in this form, you start to identify with it, and then you forget completely. And you think this is who you are, and you think that voice in your head is who you are. You think when you look in the mirror, that's me. I'm looking at myself. Some people awaken from that. They have an experience. I remember my first experience of starting to awaken this body, to remember who I was when I was about 4 years old. And I used to look out the window at my grandma Bird's house, and the trash truck would come, and it would come with its arms, it'd pick up the thing. I don't know, I loved watching that. So I would run to her big bay window in her apartment, and I would watch the trash truck come by and pick up the trash can. And once it was done, I'd go back to what I was doing. But I always watched that. Every day I watched that. And one day I'm watching it, and as I'm watching out my window inside the apartment building and seeing this happen, I get this weird feeling. And this is the first time I can remember having it in this life. The feeling I got was, whoa, I'm inside of me, inside of my head, and I'm looking through my eyeballs. I felt like I was living inside the body, right? I'm living inside of this thing, this body, and I'm looking out my eyeballs as though my eyeballs are windows. I'm looking out of them. So I had the sensation, I'm inside of me, and I'm looking out of my eyeballs, and my eyeballs are looking out of the window, and the body is inside of a physical dwelling place, a house that has a window, and I'm looking out that window at this trash truck. It was so weird. And I tried to explain it to my grandma. I ran right away. I was so freaked out by this experience that I stopped watching the trash truck. I just ran. I never do that. And I ran to tell my grandma, you got to understand what just happened. You're fine. You're just imagination, whatever. And so she never had that experience, or I wasn't explaining it right as a kid. And so she wasn't getting what I was saying. But that was the first time I had that experience. And I've had it at other times. I'll be like doing dishes or something like that, and looking out the window. Often it happened when I was looking out of windows of cars, of houses, because I'm in a dwelling place looking out of a window. And I think that's kind of what triggered it. And so I'm like doing dishes, looking out the kitchen window, and all of a sudden, boom, I get that sensation that I'm inside of me, and I'm not me. And I'm looking out the eyes, and the eyes are looking out the window, and the body is inside of a house. So I'm in a house that is in a body that's looking out of the eyes, and that body is inside of a house that's looking out of a window. And it's a very strange feeling. But once I had my reincarnation awakening, my meditative awakening, where I remembered all my reincarnations that came back, and once I had that memory, that dual consciousness is always there. I'm always aware of this not being me. I'm aware of this split personality called human consciousness. I'm aware that voice in my head is not mine. It's mine in a way, because my true self is interfacing with this body. So that consciousness that I have right now as a human being is mine in a way, but it's a very limited split personality of a consciousness. It's a split of myself, right? Because it's not the full, it's not the totality. Therefore, it's a piece of myself. You can call, it's, if you don't want to call it a split personality, you can call human consciousness a piece of your personality or a fragment of your personality. It's a fragmented part of your personality. So therefore, it's not thinking exactly like you think. Anyway, so I have that awareness all the time now, always looking through the eyes now, and I'm living inside the body. So the ghost, it makes it easier, it allows for this interfacing, because the nam and body are so different, you need some sort of go-between. And there are technologies like that need that kind of go-between in order for two things to interface. And you could probably think of some in your field right now if you're with any sort of field like that. But yeah, you can check out different things where, let's say you want an arm to work, right? A biomechanical arm. There needs to be some sort of interface go-between for the brain and the arm to communicate properly. Otherwise, it's not going to communicate, because you have a biological thing and a non-biological thing trying to communicate properly. You need some sort of like go-between so they can communicate properly and you can control that biological arm correctly, as if it's a fluid hand. So that's what the ghost is, this kind of go-between. But the ghost identifies with the body and not with the nam. Why? Because the ghost is what begins to exist when the nam begins to, it connects with the ghost and starts to divide within the physical form. That's when the ghost begins to exist. The ghost doesn't exist before that. In other words, every time you reincarnate, a new ghost is formed. And then when the body dies, you enter a ghost world, you're only there for so long, and then the ghost dies, and then you reincarnate. Okay, so now that we have a kind of idea what a ghost is, what is a demon? A demon is basically a ghost that's gone insane. It's caused so much suffering, and so much suffering has come back to it. I think Hitler is one of these characters right now that is a demon. He's a totally insane ghost. And once you reach that point of insanity where your true self snaps, you have so much suffering that hits you, that you snap and go insane and do crazy things like causing suffering and whatever. Now you're in this totally just insane consciousness. And that insane consciousness is not allowed. The rules of the universe don't allow it to reincarnate until it comes back to a certain form of sanity, right? Until a lot of its suffering has balanced out. So demons are in a perpetual state of suffering. They're constantly suffering and they're insane. And eventually that balances out and they come back to normal. And they become a normal ghost, a sane ghost again. Then that ghost dies and then they're able to reincarnate again. Okay, so that's just a quick idea of what people think of as demons, right? They're just ghosts that have gone insane. They're not mortal, they die, they return back to an insane form, and then the ghost dies. Some ghosts can last for 1,000 years, some ghosts only last a day. So it's different for everybody. But because the ghost identifies with this consciousness, when it dies, it's still identifying with that consciousness. And the true self is still being limited by that like echo of the human consciousness. And so sometimes ghosts forget a lot about human consciousness. So it's such a traumatic experience, death. And so when it separates from the body, the ghost is sometimes so freaked out that it doesn't remember being alive. And so it just walks around sometimes aimlessly or sometimes repeating stuff it did when it was alive and not knowing why it's doing it. And so the ghost is kind of like very strange, the way it kind of just, it forgets things. Other times people, they're at peace and very advanced, they die, and immediately they know, oh, I'm dead, I'm in the ghost world. And, or they think that they're in the spiritual world, whatever their belief is. And then eventually the ghost dies and they reincarnate. If they have enough awareness of self and reincarnation, then they'll know, oh, I'm in the ghost world, the ghost is going to die. If they don't have even that level of awareness yet, then they die, but they realize they're dead, but they have this belief that they're a spirit or a soul and they're going to return to heaven or whatever, then that's a belief that ghosts will have. You actually run into ghosts that believe that they're going to die and go to heaven or whatever. But they're not. They're just going to die and reincarnate. But they don't know that yet. They don't have that awareness yet. So like, yeah, I'm waiting for heaven, just waiting to wait. They're like, well, why are you waiting so long? Why are you still here? I don't know. I guess I'm in purgatory or some in-between place. They don't, or maybe they have some belief about it. And eventually the white light will come and I'll go, maybe I have unfinished business to do, whatever it is their belief is. And they'll hold on to that. Because the ghost isn't numb, they're different. The ghost has its own consciousness that's very much like human consciousness. Okay, and another type of personality it's together with the mind, but when it separates from the body, it kind of loses it most of the time. That is, it loses the human consciousness and kind of thinks a little differently. But it's still pretty much the same as human consciousness. Right, so then there are those that have reincarnated so many times, they know this process, but they haven't found the second path yet. So for them, when they die, they know, oh, I'm in ghost world. I just gotta wait for the ghost to die. So they might go mess around, do whatever they can as a ghost, and maybe try to bring comfort by visiting people's dreams and things like that as a ghost, and trying to bring those they loved when they were alive some sort of comfort before the ghost dies and then they reincarnate. People that hold on to this view, so I call it the first path. Those that hold on to this view and persist on not going down the second path, or they haven't been presented the second path, or they never thought about the second path. And this video, in a way, might awaken you to the second path if your true self isn't awakened to the second path yet. So what happens is they eventually reach such a high level of consciousness, they've been around for so long, that they can actually meditate in ghost world and make their self disappear. They just go right back. They make their form, their true form, tear apart and becomes part of the information processing. In other words, becomes like part of the universe again, as if it never were. True non-existence. So that's one way you can cease to exist. That's why the true self is not immortal. It can actually do this. So why do they do this? Their belief is that, well, that's the only way to escape suffering. You have to reach a level to where you become sort of balanced, where you don't have a bunch of suffering coming back to you. So you've reached a state of sort of balance. And while you're in that state of balance, you can meditate. If you're powerful and strong enough and old enough and knowledgeable enough, you can find this information. It's out there on how to do it. That is, people believe in something called the Akashic Records. Now, there's not such a thing as Akashic Records, but there is a way through meditation to search the infinite data that exists. And again, to understand that, you need to look at my video on it. It's a long video, but it's very explanatory about how the entire reality and the universe works. And so there's this information, this infinite information plane of existence that you can actually tap into with your consciousness and start finding knowledge about different things. And so they find knowledge of how to make self go, to make the self cease to be, to make the form pull apart. And when the form pulls apart, you no longer have any memories, you're not around anymore, you're gone, you cease to be. And so they think that's the only way to escape this inevitable suffering, because that's what happens if you just keep reincarnating it. Sometimes you're on a good planet, sometimes, good planet meaning a planet without much suffering, sometimes you're on a planet that has a lot of suffering like Earth, because we don't have the technology to overcome all these sufferings, like pain and emotional suffering. And so they don't want to go through it anymore, they're done. So they meditate and poof, they go back in non-existence. Now, you might not understand why they want to do that. I don't understand why they want to do that, because I would never want to do that. I would never want to cease to be. I'd rather go through the sufferings of reincarnation and try to find another way. And that's what I did. And that's what a lot of people have done. And that's the second path. So for those that they just can't accept that there has to be another way, there has to be a second path, have had experiences of someone called the Overmind. That's not what he's really called, but that's what I call him in my screenplay, so that's what he's called, the Overmind. I mean, everyone has different names for him, identify with him in different ways. But he's the first being in this universe to find the second path, to find non-verse. And so this is not how you escape reincarnation, but this is how you have a little bit of escape from suffering, from the reincarnation process. And eventually it's how you fully escape reincarnation, the reincarnation process. Eventually you'll be presented with someone that'll come to you in Ghost World and think that you're ready for this information and tell you about the second path. Or you might be told about it some other way. Or you might find it, you might discover it, and then someone will come and help you get there. And it's so scary because when you don't know this yet, when you die and you identify, just like you identify with the body right now, this is me. When you're dead and you're the ghost, this is me. And so when this person is trying to tell you, no, there's a second path, but you have to leave this body. Like, what? What do you mean leave this body? This is me, referring to the ghost, right? So you identify that's you. Don't worry, I'm going to reincarnate. They don't believe the ghost dies. They think that they just reincarnate and the ghost goes with them. But really it dies and they reincarnate and they get a whole new ghost the next time they're in another life. They don't know that. And so when someone tells you the second path, it's so freaking scary because you're like, if I leave the ghost, that's who I truly am. There's no, okay, imagine telling someone who believes this is who they really are, that they can leave this form. They think I would die. I can't, how can I leave, how can my consciousness separate from this form? Because they don't believe that's possible. They don't believe in out-of-body experiences. They're going to think they're going to die. You're basically teaching them how to die. And from their view. So the ghost, when you try to tell a ghost this that doesn't accept the second path yet, that there is another place to go to, right? And it's non-verse. And it's this beautiful place. And I'll describe briefly what non-verse looks like in a second. It's still part of this universe, but it's looking at the universe from a different point of view, basically. So what non-verse is kind of like it's almost like the backside of the universe in a way. But it's not, because there's no backside. But that's like an analogy. And you'll see why that analogy makes sense in a moment. But it's a different way. It's like you're not in a different dimension, a different plane of existence necessarily. Just like Ghost World is different than here, it occupies the same space Ghost World does, right? It's made up of different types of particles and stuff like that, different types of information processing, but it still occupies the same space. Like right now, I can put my hand right through a ghost right now, and it doesn't even know it, right? Or maybe it's aware of it, but it doesn't care because it doesn't affect it. So we occupy the same space, but we're being processed differently. And a way to look at it would be like a video game. In a video game, I can program a video game to where there's a form that's physical that can clap his hands. It can't put his hands through each other. The hands stop each other. It can grab its sword and pull it out, and it can't. The sword hits its head. It can't stab the sword through its head unless it dies. But let's say in this video game, it just doesn't allow that to happen, so it can't kill himself. So anyway, it takes a sword and it hits it against a table, and the sword doesn't go through the table. That's all physics being programmed into the game. I can also program it though to where there are ghosts, and those ghosts don't have those same rule sets applied to them, and the rule sets of stopping against things, because and again, in video game, it's sort of primitive how it works. It's basically a 3D video game. It's like polygons, and you just have an if statement that this polygon can't smash into that polygon. So both polygons, when they touch, then they must stop, or have some sort of physics equation that takes over and decides how they interact with each other. Like if you kick a ball in a game, if it actually bounces around, it has some sort of physics probably applied to it. Okay, or it could be a bunch of if statements, kind of a way. That's more primitive though. Therefore, it's exactly predictable where that ball goes. If it has more physics applied to the ball, then you can't really predict exactly where the ball will go, because every time you kick it, it's going to be a little different. Anyway, so with that being said, we can program a game to where it has a ghost there that has different configurations of its programming. That it can actually put its hand through a wall, put its hand through you, you put its hand through it, so forth. So we can program all that. So pretty much anything that you could imagine being programmable, then the universe can make possible. It's just whether or not it does make it possible. So whatever is possible for it to do, it might do, but it has to be within its logical framework, and it has to be something that is there, real. So just because it's possible doesn't mean the universe makes it happen, right? With that being said, so understand what the ghost is. You try to tell this person that truly believes that's who they are, they're like, no, I can't do that. I can't leave this. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for non-existence. That law will just die. They think that's what you're teaching them to do, a way to die, a way to stop existing forever. And they're not ready for that yet. Maybe in the future they'll be ready for it, but right now they're not. But if you can see the second path, be convinced of the second path, and have the bravery to leave the body and trust and believe that you're not going to stop existing when you do, then when you leave the ghost body, the ghost dies, and you see it die, and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. You see it disintegrate and stuff. And now you're in Namverse, right? And once you're in Namverse, that is freed from the ghost, and you can see the world through your true eyes. So it's not like you went to a different place. You're just no longer being trapped and bound by the ghost body. So now you're freed from that, and your full consciousness is available to you. You immediately remember all your lives, and some people freak out, some people don't. Everyone acts differently when this happens. But you have this just huge experience for the first time ever, where you're like, all these lives you remember simultaneously. You can remember everything, every little sound you've ever heard, everything you've ever tasted, everything that you've ever done, you remember it as a totality of consciousness. And that's mind-blowing, because now you have full access to who you are. And with all that knowledge comes a lot of power. But you're now seeing truly through your Namic vision. So you're seeing the world completely differently. So for example, when a Nam looks at a black hole, it can see the idea of the black hole, but it sees it very differently. The way the Nam, the way its vision works, when it sees a black hole, it sees all the information that's coming out of a black hole. Because it doesn't just, the belief is that a black hole is a singularity, that it sucks all this information into it and just gets denser and denser and denser and denser. But actually some of the information is released, and not just as Hawking radiation, but it's released almost as if in a wormhole. And so from the Namic point of view, you see, first off, Namverse, when you see through the Namic eyes, looks like all light, right? That's what it looks like, light. And planets look like distortions within that light.
They don't actually look like planets. I mean, you can tell there's a sphere there and stuff, but they don't look like Earth unless you can like see past the nomic eyes and try to look at, you know, through a different form of eyes, like through a different form of processing, to where you can see the Earth more like the Earth looks. We have to have knowledge of it to do that. If you never saw what Earth looks like, there's no way to do that. It's more of a knowledge thing to start seeing the different planets and stars and stuff in the way they actually would look to a human. You have to have knowledge of human existence, of how humans see things and so forth, and what Earth looks like from a human point of view. In order to, that knowledge, it's basically seeing through knowledge. Like bats see through sonar, through sound, you're seeing through knowledge information. If you don't have that knowledge, then you won't see the planet that way. So planets look like distortions, stars look like distortions within this big white landscape. And in Nomverse, there are things called, I call them Nombots. They've always been there. And no one knows how they got there. They've always been there. So they couldn't have gotten there, right? Because they've always been there. As part of the universe, they're always there. And they're like little builders. And what these little builders, not like, I don't know what nanobots are. I'm assuming a lot of stuff here. I'm assuming that you know what a nanobot is. So a nanobot, in human terms, in the human world, are little tiny microscopic robots that we build by atoms. And we have one right now that's like a worm, and it's very tiny. It's so tiny you have to have a microscope to see it. And it lives on the atomic level, and it's built with atoms. It's built out of atoms, like individual atoms, like you're literally working with atoms and making this thing. And what this worm does is it can go through your bloodstream. It can clean out the plaque on your arteries and things like that. The problem is they're really hard, really expensive, really hard to make, and we haven't found a way for them to really replicate themselves very fast, at least not that I know of yet. Once they can make it to where it can replicate itself very, very quickly, then you have 2, then 4, then 8, and 16 and 32 and so forth, 64, 128, and on and on. And eventually you have them, they're propagating so quickly that you can divide that into another pool, let them divide. And next thing you know, you got billions upon billions and billions of these things. Now you can start injecting them into people, and they can go in and clean your arteries out. Anyway, we have this whole map. Go look up the map work or the theoretical work of nanobots and how they would work. And we have how each one would work, what their job would be, and they can actually take molecules apart by atom by atom. So eventually, on Earth, we will have what is called a nano immune system. And that will be a bunch of different types of nanobots living throughout your body. So if a foreign object enters into your body, they know about it, let's say the flu virus, and they go and they disassemble the flu virus. They don't attack it like cells do and try to kill it. They just take it apart, atom by atom. And those atoms, they just allow to, they rearrange those atoms into some of them into water, some of them into this chemical, that, and whatever chemicals your body needs. And when it doesn't, it just arranges it into waste, and then you pee or poop it out. And so you never get sick. Anyway, so that's a little sidetrack, but it's important to understand kind of what nanobots are and how they work. Nanobots basically can build things on an atomic scale, on an atomic structure scale, even on a particle scale if you are able to make them that advanced. Well, these nanobots can do just that, and they've always been there, but they only work with not human consciousness, I shouldn't say. They only work with nomic consciousness. And you have to be super knowledgeable, therefore super powerful, in order to communicate with these things, right? And you're communicating on a knowledge level base. And when you communicate with them, it almost feels like you're imagining something to be there, but you have to have full knowledge of that thing. So, and they will start to take all the information that it needs, and it'll create that thing there in Nomverse for you. But it's not necessarily a physical object like here, because Nam doesn't need to interact with the same stuff that the human body does. It interacts with totally different things. And these Nambots build that stuff. Before they built anything, when the first person got there, it was just a white canvas, basically. And black holes look like fountains of light almost, just spewing out fountains of light. And that's the only reason why I believe, because I've seen this, and I remember seeing this in Nomverse. I have a lot of memories of Nomverse. And that's why I believe that black holes aren't just something that pulls a bunch of information in. And I believe this way before I ever knew that Hawking's thought that information was released in the form of now called Hawking radiation. But there's still this conundrum with black holes. There's such a mystery of how they work and how information is how does the universe retain, because information cannot be made or destroyed, Information cannot be made or destroyed either. So how is this information retained? Because that is information. Information goes into the black hole. If you talk to a physicist, they talk about information going into the black hole. Whatever that is, it's still information. Whether it be a spaceship or a planet or a sun gets sucked into a black hole, whatever is sucked into the black hole has information. That information cannot be lost. And so if it comes out in the form of Hawking radiation, that information has to be there. But there's still this kind of problem with the black holes. They seem to suck in more information than they actually give out. So how's all information stored inside this tiny little singularity? It almost seems impossible. But in my views, since I've seen it, and I've seen what black holes look like in numbers, like this big explosion of like a fountain of light shooting out, all the information is preserved, all information, the information is being shot into Namverse, right? And then it comes back and it's recycled in different ways into the way that we see, the way that human beings see the world. The information comes back and is recycled. So black holes are basically a way to destroy forms and recycle the information back in the universe. Information is never destroyed. So the data is always there, but it takes on a new form. Anyway, so that's something totally different than reincarnation. Sorry about that. I just find it really interesting. So when you find that second path and you're there, you can be there for a long time, sometimes a few thousand years, but eventually the rule of the universe, reincarnation, sucks you into another life. It literally feels like you're being sucked out of numbers through a tunnel, and boom, and then you forget all about it because you're sucked in. For a second there, you remember, and you know, bam, when you hit that cell, and then the cell starts dividing, you retain memory, like, what's going on? I'm so confused, and then you get so confused, and then next thing you know, you think you're this thing. And then at some point in age, you remember who you are, if you're advanced enough. But anyway, when you're there in Namverse, you need full knowledge of something in order for the nanobots, or in this case, the non-bots, to create it. They're not creating it, they're literally taking information and making it. But in order for them to do that, you have to understand, let's say you want them to build a car. You can't just know what a car looks like. You can't just know how to draw a car, map a car in a 3D program. You have to know engine combustion, what makes engine combust, how engine combustion works. You have to have knowledge of the entire working of an engine in order to make an engine. If you don't understand the entire workings of an engine, how it uses fuel, how it combusts the fuel, what the pistons do, how it uses water to cool down, you have to have the full knowledge of the engine. If you have the full knowledge of the engine and how it looks and if you can basically, in this life right now, build an engine from scratch, from materials, and you know exactly how it works and why it works that way and why you're putting certain things in certain places and why this bolt needs to be there. If you can build it from scratch and use machinery and machine all the parts you need from scratch up, because you know exactly how the engine works and why it needs to work that way and how it combustion, then you can do it in Namverse. And all you have to do is think about it. And boom, it almost seems like an engine just appears out of nothingness. But it doesn't. It's non-bots actually creating it. Not creating it, but it's a good word. They're forming it. And boom, now you have the engine there. The same thing with the car. You need to understand the entire mechanism of the car, the wheels, why the wheels are worked with, why they go around, how they attach, what the rotaries are, what the axle is, what the gears inside are. You basically need to have the full blowout of a car. When you see a car just blown out in a 3D program, you see all the individual gears. Or when you see, like, you get a toy car, a remote control car, you look at the diagram and it shows you how to build the car, and it shows the explosion of it, and it shows all the individual parts. You need to understand how all that goes together, and why it's there, and why it goes together, and how it all makes the car work, how the door hinges work, and all that stuff. If you have all that knowledge, then you can imagine a Lamborghini, and it'll make something that resembles a Lamborghini within Namverse, and you can, like, drive it around and stuff. And there are places where there are roads and all that kind of stuff, but where there's not, then you can literally just, the car would just kind of like, you know, you would just kind of like drive but not really drive, because everything just kind of flies and floats, and you can kind of control it by your consciousness that way. But then it's not really like driving, so you have to, like, you also imagine a road and create a road, and then you can, like, drive on the road. So it's almost like it almost feels like you're creating the world in front of you to interact with. Right, anyway, so that's the second path. So how do you escape reincarnation? Eventually, after enough lives, after you've lived life after life after life after life, you become so immensely knowledgeable, therefore so immensely powerful, because with knowledge comes power, true power. And because of that, you eventually become so knowledgeable of everything, how everything works, and the whole process, that when the universe puts you into a body, you immediately know who you are. And you can just go and just leave it into the ghost and just leave the ghost all simultaneously. Just leave it all and go right back to Namverse. So the second universe reincarnates, you can just and go right back to the non-verse. And that's when you've escaped. You can choose to go into bodies if you want to and live in a body, but you're fully aware that you're in a body. You have full knowledge. So it's kind of unfair, because if you are that kind of person on a planet, to everyone else, you would seem like a super person. You would literally seem like some god to especially to primitive people. They would think you're some sort of angel or some sort of god, because you would have all this knowledge and power of things. You would be able to, literally construct actual nanobots on that world and make them. Your knowledge is so great that you'd just be at everyone else has such a disadvantage to you. You'd literally to them feel like some sort of Superman. And then you can actually remake your body. Not done with your mind. You have to physically actually on the planet actually do all this stuff. But then you can augment yourself to be very, very powerful. And yeah, it'd be crazy. So people typically don't tend to want to be on planets anymore once you have escaped reincarnation. So once you've escaped reincarnation, the universe stops trying to bounce you back in, but you can willingly go if you wanted to. If you're powerful enough to understand enough how the process works. However, one thing you start experiment, once you reach a certain level of intelligence in non-verse, you can actually make a reality machine. Now, your first reality machines would be very primitive. It's kind of like a holodeck, right, from Star Trek. It's basically a place to where you can attach your consciousness, to this free-flowing form, and it can confuse your consciousness. The reality machine is basically, it's a sphere that you go inside of, and it confuses your consciousness and makes you think you're somewhere you're not. It's almost like simulating reincarnation. The difference is that you can imagine anything. It's only limited by your imagination. Now again, your first one you make isn't all that advanced, so it's limited on what you can experience and what things you're capable of doing. But as you use it more and get more advanced and more advanced and more advanced, eventually you have a really advanced reality machine that you can build, or that you imagine and you understand all the workings of it, and then the nanobots build it for you. Once you have, and you can also just live in between, there's so much to do in non-verse. Your imagination is the only limitation. And what's so cool though about the reality machine is if you're not advanced enough to create certain things, you can imagine certain things. But just because you can imagine it doesn't mean the nanobots will make it. So you're kind of limited by your knowledge, right? So you have to go gain all this knowledge of something that you're imagining in order for them to make it exist in non-verse where you can experience it and stuff. But reality machine is different, because in a reality machine, it convinces you that you're in another place, but you're not really there. Kind of like you're not really here, so in a way, right? Kind of like when you're dreaming, you're not really there. And I'll talk about dreams, a whole different thing. I've done a lot of lucid dreaming and testing, and I have a lot of memory of what dreams actually are. And just to give you a hint, dreams are an actual place that you go to. But just like non-verse is an actual place, but it's not like separate from the universe. But it is a different way of the universe working, and a different way of programming and stuff like that. So it's different. It is kind of like a different place. Most of the people there aren't real, but they're not always all created by your brain either, nor by your consciousness at all. Some of them are kind of like artificial intelligence populating this world. And it's very strange. That's a whole thing to get into. So when you're there, what the reality machine does is the reality machine convinces you that you're in this kind of virtual reality, and you can choose what level of conscious awareness you want or not, depending on how advanced your reality machine is. So you can say, hey, I want to, let's say for example, you're like, I want to know what it's like to be Superman and live in the Superman universe of the comic book world. And that is, all right, sorry about that. My phone just decided it was time to shut off again. I just realized this whole time my flash was on. But it doesn't work in the front of the phone. It's for the back phone. I don't know if that made a difference. Maybe it does flash. I didn't see it on my phone though, so flashing at me like a light. Anyway, so back to the Superman thing. So you imagine whatever rules you want to apply to this Superman universe, and those are the rules that apply to it. Whatever, you might take issues, comics, so and so, because they start to contradict each other basically. So you choose the rule set of the world you want to exist in within Krypton. And then the reality machine will convince you that you're there. Now depending on the level of your consciousness and understanding of things and intelligence, you can choose to completely forget who you are. So you have no idea who you are. You actually believe you're Superman. And let's say you say, reality machine run this simulation for 1,000 years. Let's just say, time doesn't quite exist the same in non-verse, but We measure time a little differently. But for the sake of this argument, we'll just say 1,000 years. So you tell, okay, 1,000 human years, I want to experience what it's like to be Superman. So for that 1,000 years, you actually think you're Superman. And you're gaining all these experiences and you're gaining all this knowledge through that imaginary experience. That's still changing who you are because you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining information, and you're gaining, and that in turn, the information you're gaining, that experience that you're having as Superman is developing and expanding your true consciousness, and it's expanding your imagination powers. And so when you wake up from it, you're like, whoa, that was a trip. I just thought I was Superman for 1,000 years. Like, I really thought I was Superman. That's crazy. And but now you've expanded your imagination so you can do more. So this is how you never get bored. How you never get bored is not only can you experience non-verse and all it has to offer, it has a lot to offer outside the reality machine. I mean, you just imagine it, like the more advanced you get and knowledgeable you get, the things it could create for you in different types of flying machines and these big gigantic swords. And one thing that we do a lot of in non-verse is have these like battles, like because you can't really die in the sense of dying. The only other way that I know of that Nam can die, so once you've made it to non-verse, again, is you can still choose to cease to exist. That's still an option. But most don't choose to do that once they experience non-verse. However, in my understanding, there is an event that will take place, and that is that this universe is going to crunch on itself. I know right now physicists think that this is going to expand on and on and on like this. Eventually, they'll get enough information that they'll realize that that's not the true case. And in some models, it is an absolute that it's going to crunch. Matter of fact, there's more models in physics that are accepted by physicists right now that says the universe will collapse on itself. There'll be a big crunch. Then there are that it'll just keep on expanding. For example, like within the brain model of U theory and string theory, there's a big bang and then there's big crunches and stuff like that, and these things happen. And within the cyclic, there's a dual cyclic model where like there's two brains bumping into each other and collapsing, and so it's like cause the universe to expand and collapse, expand and collapse. And there's the new cyclic model where the universe expands and collapses into just one universe. So there's quite a bit of, and this is all based on just the same data. They all have the same data, but they're making different mathematical models based on that same data, which means that the data isn't being looked at complete, or they don't have the complete data yet. If so, there'd only be one model of the universe, right? The theory of everything. Anyway, so the universe will collapse on itself. It's unstable. It can only expand out for so long, and the information can't just keep expanding out, and then it will like almost rubber band back on itself and collapse. And when that happens, every form is lost and destroyed. In my knowledge, throughout meditation and non-verse, I've searched for this, and I found it, and the inevitableness is that we'll all just be squished and destroyed and be nothing. However, there is a way out. There's a key. And if we find this key, I call it a key because it's the key information. If we find this key, we have a long time before that happens. We have billions of years. So if we all work together and we find this key, and I don't mean us as human beings, I mean us as noms. You have to have nomic awareness to even begin to start searching for the stuff. Once we find information, it's out there. You know, like I said, infinite information. Once we find information, then we can learn how to escape our known universe and go to another universe that is in an earlier state of expansion. So it's not like going to be in a state of collapse or anything like that. So basically, in my worldview, there are googolplexes of what we call expanding masses, what we call a universe now. And there's a way for us to escape ours. And even now, within string theory, there's the idea that a graviton, which is what the particle that makes gravity exist in their theory, that a graviton can actually go between branes, that is, between universes. And it's the one particle that's predicted by their math that can actually do this. So if you just take that idea for a moment, then you know it's possible for an actual physical object to actually go back and forth, right? Physical meaning that of the human understanding. So Nam is made out of something that physics don't even know of yet. Same thing with the ghosts. They haven't even discovered the particles ghosts are made of yet. They're getting closer with things like neutrinos and the Higgs boson and things like that. But, you know, in the Higgs world, the Higgs field is a whole other world, if you think about it. And if you're not familiar with what the Higgs field is, definitely check it out. It's what is supposed to be making up like this idea of this empty space that is actually a field, and that field has all these different particles in it, and they work very different than the particles like fermions and stuff, and bosons and so forth, or borons. I can't remember those. I mean, the most plain particles that we know of that make up everything here. But anyway, so that being said, with that knowledge, we'll be able to escape this universe before that happens, before the extinction event, and therefore be able to live forever. Because once you can escape this one, it shouldn't be that hard to be able to escape the next one, and you become a universal hopper, where you can jump from universe to universe to universe. And now you have all these different non-verses to experience. And because I've never been there, I don't know what they're like. I can only imagine that they're different, a little bit different. But either way, that's just one experience that we have as non-verse. This reality machine, you can see how you can never get bored. So after you live in non-verse for so long, and you do whatever you do, you make new things, you imagine new things, you gain knowledge of new things, so that you can make that imagination become a reality, and the non-bots build it for you, and then you fly it around, whatever. One of the things we do is, go back to what I was saying before, is we have these like sparring matches with these big swords, like Final Fantasy type swords, but they're like lightsabers, but they're huge, and they look more like a Final Fantasy type sword, except they're like made out of like some super energy. And since we can't really get hurt, because we're pretty much immortal, and the non pretty much feels like no pain. It might feel like pressure and stuff like that, but it feels very little pain. It does have some sort of something similar to pain receptors, but they're so dull that I can hit you with this big light sword, and it won't cut through you. I mean, it will, but you just immediately heal, because the form that you're projecting is only a form that you're projecting. You can take on whatever form you want in non-verse, because remember, you're very malleable like smoke, and you can intertwine, and the form you choose to look like in non-verse is the form that people will see. And you can change that form and malleable it, and you can have cat ears or however you want to look. You're only limited to how much you're made of, to how big you can be, though. Anyway, so when that sword goes through you, you feel a little something, but it's not like, it's even less than a boxing match. Like you feel weight, and I box. I'm telling you, that's a lot of pain. Getting your head knocked around, this does not feel good. Getting ribs broken. But in this case, you get cut right in half, and it mouths right back together again, as if you never got cut in half. But you know it happened, and they scored that point. And so you have these like cool like sparring games with all different kinds of games, racing and different things, flying ships, racing, flying like Superman. But with the reality machine, what's so cool about the reality machine, I'll end with this, the end game. How do you not go insane? Because eventually you'll do all this and you'll get bored, right? You think so. The reality machine allows you to experience those things that you can't experience in non-verse yet, because you don't have the knowledge base. You can imagine this awesome thing like a dragon, but you don't have the knowledge base of what a dragon is, how the anatomy works, and all that kind of stuff, and therefore the non-bots won't build it. So you have to have the imagination of it to such a great degree that you know the physics behind it and everything. Otherwise, the non-bots won't build it for you. But if you're in the reality machine, you don't have to have full knowledge of how everything is, because it's an illusion. But it's an illusion that's convincing you that you're in that illusion. It's like ultimate virtual reality. It's even better than the holodeck. So when you even though you can't like physically imagine how Superman works and how physics of it, all that kind of stuff, you don't have to. You just have to have knowledge of how the rules work in that universe, and then have the imagination of it. Put the reality machine on, not the reality machine. Get inside the reality machine. It's a big sphere to get inside of, and then it convinces you that you're there, and you experience this whole new world that you could never experience without that reality machine. Because you literally could not experience the Superman world in non-verse unless you had like a tremendous amount of knowledge to have the nanobots build that. So your imagination is limited by your knowledge. But in the reality machine, your imagination is not limited by knowledge. Your imagination is the limitation. That's it. So whatever you can imagine can be there. Now, here's how you don't get bored. When you enter the reality machine, whatever world it is you imagine living in, whatever it is you can imagine and make up, and you experience that world for however long you want. And also you choose your level of awareness. You can choose to be 100% aware, so you know that you're in this machine. Like right now, if I put on a VR headset and start playing a game, that's 100% awareness. Or you can choose no awareness, so you truly feel like you are that game character, or you are that imaginary being that you imagine to be in this world. Or you have some level in between. You choose that before you have the reality machine turn on and make your conscious believe you're there. But with every experience that you have, you expand your imagination. So it goes like this. It's an infinite thing that can go on and never get bored. So basically you enter into a reality machine, you have a couple really cool experiences, and that expands your imagination. Because you've expanded your imagination, you can now imagine new stuff you could never imagine before, therefore gaining new experiences. With all those new experiences, because you expand your imagination, with all those new experiences you have, it expands your imagination. And now that your imagination's expanded, you can now imagine a whole new set of worlds to experience. Which does what? Gives you a bunch more experience. And those experience points, if you want to go back to the video game analogy, do what? Give you more imagination points. With more imagination points, more experience points. More experience points, more imagination points. So you can keep imagining bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more and more and more. So the first time you put on a reality machine, you're limited to a certain set of rules and possible things you can imagine. But as you expand that imagination through each time, or through existing in non-verse and then through existing in the imagination world, you also build up your knowledge base. You can actually bring some of those things into non-verse and make them reality. Like eventually you can get intelligent enough to where you can imagine all the physics of how a particular dragon would work. And then the non-bots can actually make it be a real thing in non-verse. A real thing in a sense, in a sense. Like real thing as in the car you drive or something. Except for this thing expresses some level of intelligence. You have to be able to have an understanding of the brain and how the brain of this thing works. And so of artificial intelligence basically on a very, very high level. Anyway, so you can see how limited non-verse can be compared to the reality machine. So as you gain more knowledge, though, you gain more imaginational power, and that allows you to experience and imagine a whole new world. And just repeating myself now, it's a whole new world, and that gives you more experience, more knowledge base, expands your imagination, so you can now imagine more new worlds to exist in and live in, and then more new worlds exist, and so it just keeps expanding on and on and on. And this is not an infinite progression because it has a starting point and it goes outward. And no matter what time, no matter how old you get, I can always ask you, how old are you? And you can tell me the exact age you are. Therefore, you have a finite amount of worlds you can imagine. And no matter how long you exist, Googleplexes doesn't matter. However long you go on for, just because you never die doesn't mean you'll always have an age. Because you have a beginning point in which you remember beginning. No matter how long you live from that point on, I can always ask you, how old are you? 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 And you can always give me a finite age. Therefore, you always have a finite amount of worlds that you can imagine. Therefore, it's not an infinite. It's not an infinite regression or infinite progression. It's not a contradiction. That's what I'm saying. Because you'll never reach the end. You can't never reach the end. So you'll never reach the point where you'll say, hey, how old are you? I don't know. I'm infinite. You'll never reach that age. It's impossible. Because no matter how far you go, you'll always know your exact age. And therefore, it'll always be a finite amount of worlds you can imagine. But those worlds keep getting different and different and different. So you can always imagine new stuff, new stuff, new stuff, new stuff. And therefore, never get bored and go out of your mind. All right, hopefully that helps you guys understand my model of reincarnation and just how different it is from all of the models. I have one question for those that actually stayed to the very end. You guys are crazy. No, I'm kidding. If you stayed to the very end, that's amazing, and I really appreciate it, and that you watched it all to this point. That's just fantastic. And I imagine there's a reason why you did. And if you're still here and you're listening to this right now, it's probably because either you have some similar view to this already, because you've already started to awaken, so your views, or maybe if you have the exact same view and you came to it independently from me, and this is the first time someone else is saying it, you're like, oh my God, I thought I was the only person that believed like that. Or if it's so similar, right? Maybe I'm explaining a little different, whatever. I'm talking about the non-verse everything. Describe to me in the comments. Please don't be afraid. I know you probably won't be. If you're anything like awakened people are, you're not going to be afraid. You're just going to be like, oh yeah, that's so crazy, man. I almost see the world like that. Or for those that just kind of feel inside that this might be real. I don't want you to just believe in it. People shouldn't just believe in reincarnation because it feels good. People shouldn't believe in anything like that because it feels good or it feels right. That's not a reason to believe in something. But you might be able to awaken. If you really feel this is right, you might be close to awakening. So keep meditating, because you should already know how to meditate on your own without ever learning it. No one taught me how to meditate. I didn't go to a Buddhist monastery. I wasn't raised by Buddhists or something like that. When I started meditating, I just knew how. I just remembered how to meditate. And it's a different kind of meditation. It's not like Buddhist meditation. It's not like Zen meditation. There's lots of different kinds of meditation within Buddhism. And after I got older and already knew how to meditate, I started looking at different ways to meditate to see if they were, how different they were. And there are many different ways to meditate. And particularly I meditate is very different. It's almost like self-hypnosis. And anyway, so keep meditating, keep meditating, keep meditating. Because if you're close, then you already know how to meditate, like your own way of meditating. You already know how to do that. And if you see that portal, go through it. Don't be afraid of it. There's nothing to fear. Go right through that portal. Remember who you really are. Come back with and bring as much of it as you back as you possibly can. And keep doing that and keep bringing back information and become more and more aware and have more and more memory of who you really are. Yeah. So that's my feeling, is that if you feel that kind of connection to this information, if it's so strong to you that you just want to believe in it, don't believe in it, please. Please, no one start believing in non-verse and stuff like that. The name of my philosophy is Gnomic philosophy. And so pretty much anything that, and now you guys know what video game I made. If you guys are familiar with Gnomic games, anything that says made by Gnomic games with a little alien like this meditating, I made that game. At least I did all the designing and all the logic work behind everything like that. I don't program, but I know a lot about programming, but I don't actually sit down and program the games. I hire someone to program them for me. But I have to have a high level understanding how the game works. I build all like they build me a level designer, very, very advanced level designer, not like create your own Mario, very, very high level. We have to actually input parts of code and stuff like that. And then I use that to build all of the game. So that kind of sucks having to do all that. But anyway, so I have a few games out there. 37 Days to Die on the Xbox 360. It's in the indie section. Speed 7, really cool card game. Also Xbox 360 in the indie section. And I haven't designed anything yet for newer consoles, but I have designed something newer for phones. And that's for the Android phones. I haven't made it for Apple yet. And it's just totally free. I don't have to pay anything for it. I don't do all that crap where there's ads. There's no ads. There's no having to like make the game so hard that you have to like spend money on more stuff and more stuff. Like, it's not one of those games. It's just free, play, enjoy it. And it's called Magic vs. Monsters. If you like Plants vs. Zombies, and if you like Bejeweled Blitz, you'll like this game. It's kind of a mix of those two games is the best way to describe it. All right, anyway, I keep looking at myself instead of here. Anyway, so those are all made by Gnomic games. Yeah, but anyway, so please don't believe in Namicism because it feels right. Remember it. You'll know it when you remember it. When you have this experience and you remember, you just know. There's no questioning about it anymore. Just like you know your thinking thing, you'll know that you are Nam, because that's the other level of thinking that you have, and you'll know that this is split personality of self. You know, and all this will become apparent, and it won't be just a feeling anymore. Now it'll be an actual knowledge that you have inside yourself. And good luck getting anyone else to believe it anyway. But I hope that no one. I don't want anyone to believe because it feels right. That is not my philosophy at all. My philosophy is you must remember to believe. Now you can believe in my theory of everything. That's fine. But I don't think one should believe in reincarnation, all this other weird stuff, without some sort of valid evidence. And there is no valid evidence you can have right now as a human being except for remembering. So anyway, that being said, thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. If you like this, maybe other people like it too. Share it on your social networks, your favorite networks, Facebook, whatever, Google, Hangouts, all that good stuff. And just share it with whoever you want. Share the link with people on your phone, whatever. Just share the crap out of it. I'm telling you, people will like it if you've liked it. Well, there's a good chance they might like it. They might think it's crazy. But if you don't even assume that if you share it with your friends and stuff, don't even make any assumptions. They might actually like you, even if you think, oh, they would never in a million years even want to entertain the idea of reincarnation. It's so ridiculous to them. They might still like this idea. I've talked to atheists and stuff that are like, you're not really an atheist, man, if you believe that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, how not? I don't believe in gods. I don't believe in eternal consciousness. That those things don't exist. They're like, okay, I guess so, but all this weird stuff, why do you believe all this weird stuff then? And after they've heard my full model of reincarnation, some of them are like, you know what? That's plausible. That makes sense. I kind of like the idea. It kind of feels right, or whatever words they put it in. It's like, hey, that seems plausible. It seems reasonable. It's no longer a crazy idea that is reincarnation. It's now an idea that, maybe, I don't believe in it, but maybe. So don't just share it. Hit the like button, subscribe for more, all the good stuff. Leave some comments. I'd love to hear you guys' comments. If you made it this far, you're super patient. And if you made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, what you think, your personal beliefs, experiences, things like that. I love debating, absolutely love it. So if you want to like debate certain things, feel free to debate me. I probably won't debate on YouTube too much because I don't think that's a good debate forum, but I go to paltalk.com as Karmic Overflow. And so 2 words, capital K, capital O, Karmic, and then Overflow on paltalk.com. Great way to like have actual voice chats. It's awesome. And moderated by people and stuff. And there's some really great rooms in the Christianity section called The Great Religion, or it's called, one of the rooms I like to go to, I think it's Believers versus Non-Believers, something like that. There's 2 rooms that are kind of similar names, and that one's really fun. And yeah, so you'll find me there. So I'm there here and there, and I love debating. So if you end up wanting to debate, leave a comment saying, I'd love to be able to debate you about stuff. And I might even debate you in the comments a little bit. But it'd be better if, you know, we can come to one of those rooms or something like that in Pal Talk, and then have like a cool debate, you know, within that room when it's kind of not very busy, or we can make a room if we need to. But yeah, so yeah, anyway, so that's that. So feel free to leave your contrary type debating comments. I'm not afraid of that at all. I love it, in fact, like I said. So again, thanks for watching. So much patience you guys have to sit through this entire thing. And hey, if you sat through this entire video in one sitting, leave a comment, please. Like, you deserve bragging rights. Be like, I sat through the whole thing in one sitting. That's freaking amazing. All right, thanks for watching.